So today we are going to be focusing on Carbon13. Carbon13, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is a Cambridge-based venture builder. Well, originally Cambridge-based, but having now recently branched into Berlin as well, which is set up to tackle the climate crisis. Through a 12-week programme, they take aspiring founders, thinkers and doers from all around the world who are all united by a common desire to fight climate change. So today we are joined by Emma Mee, Community Director for Carbon13, who will speak to you, first of all, in a bit more detail about the programme itself. What is it? How you could get involved. And this is a particularly timely event because the application deadline for the next cohort actually closes at the end of this month. So she'll talk you through what the application process would entail. And we will then hear from Wes and Josephine, who were both founders that came through the programme and are going to talk to you about their experience, how they got onto the programme, what the experience of kind of going through that venture builder was, and what life has been like for them post Carbon13 and the cool things that they're both working on. So that's enough from me. I'll now introduce you to Emma, who will talk to you about the programme.
Thanks, Cherry. You've done a wonderful introduction. That's kind of everything I was about to say. I'll introduce you to Carbon13. I know that some of you will have heard of us and what we're doing. I know particularly those around Cambridge might have seen our progress over the last year and a half, but we're still a very new organisation. I only joined about 6 months ago. And there's huge potential and excitement, I think, around what we're doing. So let me just talk you through it. Carbon13 is a venture builder, first and foremost. And that's to say that it's quite different from an average accelerator or incubator programme. We start by inviting individual people to join our programme at the beginning of each session, where at the beginning of the 6-month process, where they join us from different walks of life. They may have a lot of experience in commercial or in technical roles, and we collate our cohort together accordingly to make sure that we've got the right number of people. So from a commercial founder's perspective, they are often people who have perhaps run a venture in the past. They're a successfully exited co-founder, and this is not their first rodeo. It might also be suitable for consultants who have been working in particular areas for a long time and finally want to get their hands dirty. Others have joined from business leadership positions. And generally, people have a good wealth of experience behind what they're doing. The average age of our cohort is 37, and that's remained quite consistent since we began. The technical founders join us from a whole host of organisations, and I describe them very flippantly as having a Cambridge PhD equivalent across all sorts of ranges of science or engineering. They may be computer software developers, but they are working at a very high level and they've demonstrated a certain amount of excellence in their field already. So the cohort that comes into Carbon13 is quite an intimidating bunch. We have around 70 or so of them. We actually just run a cohort of 104 in the last cohort that's undergoing. Possibly too many. I think I'd argue there's certainly a saturation point that is met there. And for the first 6 weeks, it's a bit insane. We effectively lock everybody in a room together in person in Cambridge in 6 weeks until they start to crystallise around ideas and form teams. Now, there's a range of different ways that we do this. You could argue that the neural diversity among entrepreneurs is very, very broad. Typically speaking, you have a lot of introverts and extroverts, and they will always gravitate towards their own kind. So it's a bit like mixing oil and water. We need to keep churning them up, keep giving everybody opportunities to meet people that they wouldn't automatically want to gravitate to in a room, to really understand the depths and the breadths of the experience and the skills that are there. So that's a really intense process. Members of the cohort have described it very much like Love Island meets The Apprentice. It's stressful. I think, I'm interested in Wes and Josephine's opinions on this, but it is hard work and very intense. Those conversations start early in the morning and they continue through the evenings and weekends, but you would not doubt the passion and the motivations of everybody in the room to really make this work and to come up with some good ideas to solve climate change. Now, some people will have ideas that they're already familiar with. In a commercial environment, they might have identified a pain point in their particular sector that they want to address. or from a technical expertise position, they perhaps are working on something already that they want to deploy and commercialize in this space. But often people don't have an idea at all, and they're literally reporting for duty. But their ideas are starting to take shape by the time they go through to phase 2. From there, it's head down, it's a lot of customer discovery, market validation work that we try and support. And we do something called carbon intelligence, which is really key to Carbon13. And this is how I describe as sort of carbon accountancy. This is teaching founders to really drill down into the numbers, the metrics, the impacts that they're going to be having as a new business, so that they can talk with genuine confidence about the impact that they're having on the world, and how that climate mitigation, or in sometimes carbon removal, is really going to take effect as that business grows and scales. So we set a line in the sand, 10 million tonnes for each of our ventures. We give them 8 to 10 years to demonstrate scale to be able to prove that, but we want to see ventures come through our programme that can reach that goal. Now, many can actually supersede that by 10 times. If you're looking at some of them, such as biological concrete, for example, that can be way over the 10 million tonnes. But for others, that's enough to demonstrate that they are very much game-changing, sort of system-changing ventures. This is not just about taking something and doing it a little bit greener. Once they've demonstrated to us that they can do that and that they're reaching that 10 million tonnes, we choose to invest or not. And for those ventures that we invest in, we then support them in something which looks a bit more like a typical accelerator program through to the final showcase day that takes place 9 months after the program has officially started. So on showcase day itself, our ventures will stand up and pitch to a room full of people in Cambridge, and I invite everybody on this call to come along to our Cambridge Showcase Day on the 6th of December if you want to see some really good, exciting ventures do their thing. I'll share a link to that afterwards. But at that stage, the businesses are still really, really young. They may only be 4 or 5 months old. And yet, because of the credibility and the caliber of the founders that join our program, they have usually got letters of intent from customers. They have got corporate partners already signed up. They're perhaps already underway in their seed fundraising. So that trajectory that they're all taking off is quite impressive and certainly very exciting. In terms of scale, Carbon13 is still on its 3rd cohort, so we've barely begun, really. Cohort 3 will be doing their showcase in December, as I mentioned. Cohort 4 has already started, and they're in that 2nd phase. But Cohort 5 will be launching in March next year, with Cohort 6 and 7 closely following on its heels. And we're pleased to be opening an office in Berlin to start running the similar venture builder programs out there. In addition, we've always had a number of pre-formed teams or early stage ventures come to Carbon13 and want to get involved because they like that carbon intelligence piece that we do, and they want to have a go at pitching for the funding. We have had them involved in the venture builder before, but typically in that first few 6 weeks phase where everybody else is teaming, they stand around looking remarkably sure of themselves and confident because they already have their team, which isn't ideal. And we're now going to be launching a venture launchpad program specifically to cater for those businesses that are already up and running in terms of their team and just want the same sort of support and journey that Carbon13 offers the venture builder. So we're a small team. We're growing very rapidly. We want big international plans. So there's plans to ideas to put a new international office out there once a year from now on in, Berlin being just the start of that. It's quite terrifying. But I will say that finally, I mean, I've worked in climate change all my life, back when it was just called sustainability, because climate change wasn't necessarily real. I'm that old. But the motivations and the kind of resources and the excitement and the impatience around climate change these days in big business, in venture launch pads and accelerator programs all over the world, with venture capitalists and with all those funds and that money, I've never seen anything quite like it now. It definitely feels like it's absolutely the right time, way overdue, you'd argue, but it really feels like there's a huge amount of potential to do everything we can in this. So we describe it that we're launching 1,000 ships, and now feels very much like the right time to do so. Thanks, Jeremy.
No, amazing. That's, yeah, a lot more detail. So thank you so much. And I think really interesting to hear that it doesn't have to be, it can be people with kind of pre-formed teams and pre-formed ideas can go in and use the venture builder as a space to kind of further accelerate and develop those ideas out. Because there might be people who think, actually, I'd quite like to do this, but I've actually already started something, and is it too late? So yeah, good to hear that it's open to such a variety of people. Thank you. So now we're going to hear from two people who have been through the venture builder themselves, met co-founders, and have kind of exited and started growing and developing their businesses. So first of all, we're joined by Wesley from FoodSquared. Which cohort were you in, Wes? Was it the last cohort? There was the one before, right?
Cohort 2.
Cohort 2, that was it. There we go. So yeah, the floor is yours, Wes. Please share your experiences.
Thanks, and thanks, Emma. That was great. That was a great intro. Congratulations on the launchpad. That sounds very exciting. So yeah, I guess I always kind of felt that I wanted to start a company, but I definitely took the corporate path first, and I spent over 6 years at a big corporate in the US after having got my bachelor's of engineering, actually in shipbuilding before that. So kind of had an engineering background. I worked at a big corporate in the US. That was Waste Management. And at Waste Management, I did a lot of kind of digital product management, and I did kind of entrepreneurial things within that company where I felt like I could practice at least some of the things I would have to do to start a company. And, you know, within that business of waste management, I saw a lot of opportunities for things that we could do for sustainability. There were a lot of different waste streams that we handled, a lot of different ways that we could handle them better. I kind of saw the commercial side of those challenges as well, in addition to the environmental drivers. So I toyed around with a number of different things that I could do after that, trying to figure out when was the best time to leave. And I think a lot of, it's always like you're playing around with this question of what, I really want to start a company. How do I do it? Some people just have a thing that grows organically, which I've always been kind of envious of, because that's a beautiful way to go if you start a product and people love it and it just turns into a business. But for me, it was very intentional. And it was also kind of opportunist, because I completed a kind of career arc at that company where I felt like I had delivered a lot of good things and I'd learned a lot. And I was kind of assessing the human capital I had developed and what I could do with that. And that was kind of around the same time that Carbon13 was getting going. So I found the opportunity to join that, and it was a perfect match for me. I had played with other ideas. I was living in the west coast of the US at the time, and I was going around to different supermarkets and trying to understand what their problems were. I wanted to curb supermarket waste. And one of my real concerns was that I was doing it alone. So not only did I have a little bit of an echo chamber because I didn't have a team yet, but I kind of thought that I'd be a lot more productive and have a lot more fun if I were doing it with other people. Some people really want to be one-person founders. I realized pretty quickly that I wanted a team. So the timing of Carbon13 and the fact that it was all based on forming a team was very attractive to me. I think I had some of the best 6 weeks of my life when I got there. And I always tell people that even if you're not successful in getting funded out of the first 2 stages of Carbon13, there is a human experience there, which I think is not only really critical just for business in general, understanding how much of this is just the human process and a human problem, but there's a personal development aspect where you're meeting, as Emma said, really phenomenal people 12 hours a day for 6 weeks, and you're networking, and it's very intentional. Everyone's there with a purpose. So that's a great experience. And there, who knows, the kind of thing that it's really unknown serendipitous collision type thing where you're just getting a lot of great people together and things are happening. You don't really know what's going to happen the next day. And so even if it doesn't go to plan, there are really cool opportunities that you can pursue after that. So that's great. I was kind of weighing up from a high level, thinking about the direction that I wanted to take. I knew that if I had the choice and the privilege of a somewhat personal runway after doing corporate for a few years and getting some savings, that I'd either want to tackle something in the environment, So a sustainability enterprise or a social enterprise, something for people or environment. And because I had that waste background, I figured I might as well start with the things that I know best. I'm a first-time founder, so I didn't have the credential of having started something successfully before. So I wanted to leverage everything I had in my back pocket. And I went to Carbon13 with this kind of rough, cut me off when I'm going too long here, a couple minutes, but a rough idea that I wanted to do something with waste circularity. And it's kind of this game of musical chairs as you speak to a lot of different people who you could team with who have a similar interest. And yeah, we'll talk about it in the Q&A, I guess, of like how much you want to really sell a certain idea and how much you want to really be open, and it's always a balance. But at the end of the day, we formed a team based on the people, knowing that we would have to pivot and we would want to survive throughout pivots. So sure, we do have complementary skill sets. One of our co-founders is a successfully exited entrepreneur. The other one, our CTO, is a very successful researcher in our field. And we knew that we would be able to kind of pivot this whole thing if we needed to. But the sector that we were targeting was still kind of food waste, food circularity. How can we do something better with organic waste and do something better, specifically for the emissions there? And we converged on a field called alternative proteins, which is kind of like the beyond and the impossible and the corns of the world, trying to create substitutes for meat and fish, which is what we're doing now, all but in a kind of different way. So we went from being an ingredients company, and again, if you have questions on this, we'll do it in the Q&A, but we went from being an ingredients company, and it was a hard pivot kind of to a technology company where we now take ingredients and turn them into products, as opposed to turning raw materials or waste streams and turning them into ingredients. So yeah, we're a food tech company. It's FoodSquared. It's a 3-person team. There's a couple of things that I think we should hit on, like what we're hiring for. We're definitely going to be looking for manufacturing engineers, food manufacturing engineers, precision, like additive manufacturing for sure, food science, industrial engineering, things like that. We'll definitely want to be hiring for those in the next couple of years. And we're also looking for strategic partnerships always to kind of become part of consortiums or to bring in partners that are doing it better and want to take on a specific part of our business while we can focus on our core. So software partners, hardware partners, food science is really our core. So we're sticking to that. But yeah, that's who we're hiring for. And I think the things that keep me up at night, it's really just the nuts and bolts of running the company. I heard a quote once that I think describes it really well, which is that you're trying to build the plane while it's already in the air. And so, I actually do wake up with having like nightmares of not really knowing if I'm riveting the right panels of the plane into the right places all the time. And so you have to kind of always be checking, is your team healthy? Checking with your team. Are you going in the right direction? Are you personally going in the right direction? Is your role within the company still where it should be? And then you have to execute. You have to balance the planning with the execution. That's probably the hardest part.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And just if you don't mind adding on just to the end, what sort of support have you had having kind of attained your funding and exited the venture builder? What's your connection to Carbon13 continued to be since then?
Yeah. So we did get funded through Carbon13, and that kept us alive for a few months, which is what I think it's supposed to do. And then we got another round of investment from Big Idea Ventures, which is it's a world-renowned alternative protein fund and accelerator. So we're now part of their accelerator program. We have our second accelerator pitch day. So we did one with Carbon13, and we'll be doing another one in about a month in Singapore, where we will pitch to another set of investors. But we closed our pre-seed round with Carbon13 and that other investor, and we'll be raising our seed round in the first quarter of 2023.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with that. And thank you so much for sharing that. As I've mentioned before, we'll be going into breakout rooms after this. Emma, Wes and Josephine will each be in a room. So if you've got more questions for Wes about, how he knew his co-founders were the right people to be working with and what that experience of kind of building the business out and pivoting were, then I'm sure he'll be happy to go into more detail on those with you. And now Josephine Bromley is going to speak to you. She was in cohort 4, is that right?
3 almost.
Great. Oh, God, see, I'm one cohort out all the time. And she now is co-founder of a business called Mortar IO. So Josephine, share your experience for us.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. So I'll start in the same way that Wes did. So I actually studied English language, which was a pretty useless degree. But I did enjoy it. I've always enjoyed languages. And then I started working as a translator because I speak German. And then I ended up getting a job working at Google in the localization team, so translating Google's products, and then moved into the sales team. And then sort of similar to Wes, kind of got that corporate experience. Didn't really like working in a corporate anymore, and I became very interested in working in more of an impact-led career. And I became very interested in fintech, which was a sort of burgeoning industry at the time. It's kind of very well known, but even a few years ago, it wasn't that well known. So I left Google and I joined a fintech startup, and I got the startup operator experience, which was great. I still felt like, I was missing that impact and that feeling that I was doing more than just making money or making money for other people. So I moved into the construction industry, and opportunity came up for a grant funded project to look at greening the UK highways, so making the motorways electric but for HGVs. So that was a really interesting project. And then I kind of fell in love with sustainability. I absolutely fell in love with the built environment. It's a super interesting space. As an outsider, I was a bit biased and thought buildings were a bit boring, but that's definitely not the case. They're very, very interesting, and they're really important to our future and having a sustainable planet. So all these things were swirling around in my mind, and I got really into the sustainability community within London, where I was living at the time, and with climate tech. I knew that I 100% wanted to move back into startup world. And that but it just had to be in sustainability and ideally in the built environment. And I saw Carbon13 randomly at one of the, actually, I don't know where I saw it. It was a very random kind of thing. I was less intentional than Wes has been. I've been a bit all over the place. Probably still am a little bit. But I applied for Carbon13. So Carbon13 has 3 types of profiles. I think that's still the same. Emma can correct me if not, but we've got a commercial, technical, and venture catalyst. I applied as a venture catalyst, as a person who has startup experience, has kind of a more of a generalist background, but I suppose has the enthusiasm of someone which is kind of needed in an early stage startup, as Wes probably knows. It can be a bit soul destroying at times, so you kind of need to keep positive. So anyway, so I joined Carbon13 as a venture catalyst. I met my 2 co-founders. One is commercial and one is technical, so we formed a nice little tripod there. And we were all in the built environment, and we all were really passionate about fixing the inertia in the built environment. So it's a super slow industry. It takes ages to make decisions. Data is incredibly fragmented. Stakeholders are very fragmented. It's very hard to get projects financed unless you have a good brand name, all these kind of things. And we decided to focus on where can we help that inertia most, kind of pulling on all our skills and our background. And we focused in on right at the beginning of decarbonisation journeys. So, and specifically, if you're starting a decarbonisation journey and you're a property owner who has a large portfolio of properties. So typically what you do is something, your very, very first step, if you sit down on your computer on Monday morning, you think, right, I'm going to decarbonise my properties. You'll start to do a virtual audit of those properties, but unfortunately those virtual audits are very inaccurate. So you could be plus or minus 50% in terms of estimating the costs required and the technical risk and all those kind of things. So it means that even beginning to understand how you decarbonize and how you hit your 2030 or 2040 net zero targets is really painful. And what you do is you set up kind of this starting point, which isn't very reliable. And it means that the whole process beyond that, if you're starting off from a bad place, it's not going to kind of lead to better things when you're planning how to actually do the interventions required to make my buildings more energy efficient. So we're like, okay, we can help with that first part. We can basically provide digital models of buildings that are 3 times more accurate and 3 times more faster, to create than using an Excel spreadsheet. And that's essentially the solution that we're focused on now. So very quickly, as we went through the Carbon13 journey, so after we'd done the teaming and we'd come up with the solution, as Emma says, we started to do customer discovery. We started to validate, oh yes, this is an issue. I hate my Excel spreadsheet, but it's all I've got to do. It's all I've got to use, sorry. What you're suggesting sounds really interesting. So that was very exciting for us, very validating. We were then successful in getting funding from Carbon13, which was great. And we are, definitely earlier than Wes. So we're still technically in phase 3. And now we're gearing up to the pitch day in December, and what we've achieved to date is around 3 letters of intent from customers. So that will be sustainability consultants or large property owners who want to use our technology to do those virtual audits more efficiently. We are working with a couple of academic institutions because we want to, software is never going to be as defensible as something like hardware or hard tech, especially if we've got patent on that. So we want to kind of put some academic rigor to the models that we've developed. So that's really important for us. And then finally, we're fundraising like crazy, which isn't very fun, but it's necessary, unfortunately. Because once we've got the funds to build our basic MVP, then we can go out and sell it and actually start generating revenue, which is exciting. And I think that's everything. And then I'll answer any more questions in the Q&A.
Fab, thank you very much. And good luck for the pitch day in December and the fundraising.